Welcome to Landmark Talks Property, a podcast by Landmark Information Group that covers all things property in short and intelligent podcasts.
Hello, I'm your host, David Lee, and welcome to the latest podcast from Miller and Bryce. Today, we're building on an episode you might have listened to in the Handbook series, where we looked at the impact of AI specifically on the conveyancing process and property law. Today, we're going to look more generally at AI and its impact on the business world, and we're talking about balancing intelligence, AI and human judgment in today's property industry, but we're also looking at those wider business impacts as well. I'm delighted to welcome two guests from Miller and Bryce to chew the fat on this meatiest of issues. We have Richard Hepburn, who's Managing Director of Miller and Bryce, and Scott Brymer, who is Business Development Director Commercial. So welcome, Scott and Richard. And Richard, I'll come to you first. Just tell us a little bit about how you're using AI, both in your personal and professional life.
Well, hi, David. I'm really excited by it. It's an amazingly powerful engine that's helping me speed up a lot of what I do. So in a personal sense, it's really beneficial at home. I've literally always got a longer list of to-do tasks than I can ever get through. So this helps me achieve that. So a good example was from last weekend. I had one of those really annoying tweeting smoke alarms, when the battery is gone. And I was lying in bed and my wife's saying, go and fix that alarm. So I headed off and got my ladders, realised that I couldn't actually get the cover off. I didn't know how to get the cover off. So I immediately got my phone, opened up ChatGPT, took a picture of the cover. Literally within seconds, I had an itemised list of how to get the cover off and change the battery. So it just gives you a kind of sense of just the little things now that AI is really helping with. I think in my professional life, it's also really helping me personally at the moment to speed things up. So that could be anything from finding an old document or email, helping draft notes or an internal report. But where's the but, I think, in the professional life? And as it stands, I'm not sure I really completely trust the outputs. And I'm very conscious about the quality of evidence that's offered up by AI as to how it's justifying what it's offering me. So I think to summarise, really excited by the potential, but still with a degree of healthy scepticism about what it can do.
Okay, thanks. Great anecdote there about the smoke alarm, Richard. Thanks very much for that. And what about you, Scott? What's your broad attitude towards AI, again, both in your kind of personal and professional life? How is it useful for you?
Broad attitude is enjoy using it. I'm not sure I've necessarily found sort of the use case that works for me or the best version, but I think what you quickly identify is that different ones are better for different tasks. So you might employ Gemini to pull out images, you might pull ChatGPT for more data, you might work through other ones that perform different tasks. But I've kind of used it for everything from pulling together sort of cartoons for my kids and just like weird and wonderful ideas that come out of an 8-year-old and just plug it in and say, provide some cartoon strips for this. That's quite entertaining. Saves me the hassle of trying to draw it. And work-wise, helps refine presentations, just like the core elements. Applying that smell test of should I share this? Can I share this? What is it that I'm sharing? That's always the kind of guiding line as to what goes into it. But it certainly has been helping me, and I think we're only touching the sides, I think, in terms of how beneficial it can be.
And you mentioned your kids there. How old are your kids, and are they aware of AI and are they using it? And how do you think about AI in terms of your children and them growing into an era where it's just part of their lives?
Don't want to get pulled into the debate of social media and children, but from the AI perspective, so my kids are 8 and 10. All the learning at school primarily is sent out on a digital basis. There's not really much homework done in paper anymore. Method of consumption is very different. And, an example I always give of my eldest is that, as soon as she could stand, she was trying to swipe the TV because the assumption was, well, the images must move to the side.
Yeah.
Where it goes, I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to really evolve and change the way of learning. I think it's going to be very difficult for educators and friends that I've got who are lecturers comment on that. How do you assess it? Is there common themes that they can tell that it's AI language? Definitely for the benefit, for the challenge. Will it make us smarter? Who's to say? I don't know yet.
We'll ask your daughters in 20 years' time, Scott, and see what they've got to say about it. And what about looking again more professionally? In every business sector, there's always going to be differences of opinion. There's going to be deniers. There's going to be early adopters. There's going to be a lot of people in the middle. But what about the property sector, sort of broadly speaking? What do you think is the attitude of property professionals towards AI and how they're approaching it?
I think it depends. I think everybody, I think legal professionals and people in general are skeptical, as Richard touched on. I think a dose of healthy skepticism is right. And I think that's probably amplified by the training that lawyers receive, that you're kind of trained to look for risks and challenges and where that sits. But equally, they want to run their businesses efficiently. Residential conveyancers are under pressure on so many different fronts, whether it be keeping a chain together, whether it be ensuring the loan proceeds are in, ensuring the loan hasn't expired, ensuring the home report needs updated. There's many tasks, I think, which would benefit from automation. They're just probably not perhaps quite there. I think, there's some businesses that will be more adept and skilled at taking that advantage, but I think there are advantages there for everybody. Yeah.
And Richard, you get involved in kind of the wider business community. You're in the property sector, you with Miller and Bryce, but you're always interested in what other business sectors are doing. And I just wonder what observations you've got about the sector that you work in relative to that wider business community in terms of AI.
Yeah, I think certainly the sector we're in seems to be getting carried along by the same buzz and energy about AI that seems to be everywhere. It doesn't matter which article or conference agenda item or business discussion, AI seems to come up at some point in it. I think for us specifically, it's about, we're in the business of property information and data. And I think that there's a huge opportunity to continue the digitization of data, because not all data is digital yet. So AI might struggle to deal with some of that. But I think the data is held in so many places and it does change regularly. So I think our role is really to look at that data, make sure the data quality is important so that whatever we're putting AI on top of, it's actually got a good solid foundation. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure we're quite there yet with AI, have been able to provide complete assurance around all of that to a level needed to support a property transaction. So yeah, again, healthy skepticism.
Yeah, and what just let's build on that a bit, Richard. What do you mean by, just explain a bit more what you mean by healthy skepticism in a kind of practical sense?
I think for me, obviously I've got a bit of grey hair, so it's probably a factor of age, really, that having come into the workplace at the dawn of PCs, and then seen early spreadsheet, word processing packages arrive, heard all the sales benefits of things like enterprise systems and SAP, they were all promising to revolutionise the world of work. So I guess I'm just viewing AI through the lens of those things perhaps not having quite delivered all the promises. What they did was more change people's roles rather than replace them. So I think I'm very much looking at AI in that context. I think there's also a really growing body of commentary about AI that is such a powerful tool that it really needs more critical thinking, not less, to make sure it's going to be effective. So to put that in another way, I think the psychologists would say it's about cognitive supervision. That's what AI really needs to be successful, make sure outputs make sense. And I suppose that's a concern that I hear from other business leaders in the context that some younger employees perhaps are less questioning about that. They either don't have those skills or they're not using them to validate what they're seeing. So I think my earlier response about data quality is essential in that you need to have data quality.
Okay, that's really interesting. And Scott, just to come to you on that specific point, whether or not, Gen Z or moving into Gen Alpha now is perhaps less questioning towards AI and perhaps is more easily giving of their data into AI engines and whatever. Do you agree with that? And what are the implications, do you think?
I'll take that as a compliment that I'm closer in age to those generations, but I think it's difficult to say. I'd like to think through the training, through diploma that they would go through, if they're embarking on a legal profession, that those skills are going to kind of carry through from the partners they're going to train under. But in general, I think there probably is more of a sort of laissez-faire attitude to how they approach it. I think I was doing lectures on the diploma, Aberdeen, Edinburgh and Dundee, and you're kind of confronted with a sort of sea of laptops and your mature students at the front paying attention. And reflecting on it afterwards, I actually thought they're probably just sitting with their laptop on, maybe ChatGPT running, give me a breakdown of this presentation, and they don't really have to do the thinking, which maybe is good, but I like to think I was maybe more entertaining than the script off the back of it. I think it will be a challenge. I think they've grown up in a digital first, technology driven environment that I think even I have struggled to understand.
And do you think there is also, I've heard this at a previous kind of conference I was involved in, that the work of legal trainees, that there will be a proportion of that work that is already moving over to be done by AI. Can you see that? Can you see a period where a lot of the work that trainees are doing will be done by AI, and what does that mean for the legal profession in future? Lots of philosophical questions here. Sorry, Scott.
Yes, no. I think firms have always been sort of set up like that. I think my last seat in my traineeship was banking litigation. So I went from like a nice quiet seat in family, private client, down to chaos in 2009 in banking litigation and house repossessions. And that was already set up using kind of CRM software, but broken down to non-contentious through paralegals, contentious through lawyers to make it make sense. I suppose if you take all the work away for trainees and it goes to AIs, then you're not left with much for the trainees to do, potentially.
And is that more of a problem because they're less questioning and they're allowing the technology to do the work? Is that generation creating a problem for themselves by being less questioning of the technology, and that technology is going to take some of their work?
I think the way that I've dealt with it when I've been presenting to the trainees and to the diploma students has been to really make sure that they keep applying sort of strategical thinking, logical thinking, ask themselves why they're being asked to do something, how to learn the soft skills. And I suppose that's maybe what could be eroded by leaning too heavily on the tech, is that you're going to not get into the soft skills. You're not going to get into how to build a relationship. It might become more daunting to do that. And then that becomes kind of another different business challenge.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Very interesting. And coming back to you, Richard, another big issue that we always hear about is whether regulation can keep pace with technological change. It's again what you said. We've seen so many technological changes. Have they had the impact we've expected? Every generation has grappled with that issue. Can legislation keep pace with technological change? Maybe that's heightened with the pace at which AI is kind of coming into our lives. And do you see that as a danger? How are businesses going to address that kind of regulatory lag, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's already growing in some sectors. I've spoken recently to some people who are involved in financial services. And certainly regulators in that space are already saying, look, trial projects that look like could deliver fantastic efficiencies for you, we're just not sure about this yet. We're not sure about the data, the accuracy, the repeatability. So they're not allowing those projects to go ahead. I think looking at our own business, we're being cautious, and we're really trying to route any AI-based project through a kind of central governance group, which is just going to give that oversight to make sure we don't launch anything into the wild that's going to be dangerous for us.
Okay. Scott, any thoughts on that, on regulation and whether it can possibly keep pace?
I think that's a real challenge. I mean, I think there's things going through even the Scottish Law Commission at the moment on, digital signing, future of that, how that's going to inform policy. I think the risk is that by the time, because of the pace at which the tech is shifting and moving, that by the time the recommendations are made, it's almost out of date. And I think that's the challenge. I think we're in an environment where we're kind of self-regulating, or the peak bodies are regulating, or we're kind of under the auspices of data protection regulations and other things that fairly hefty fines attributed to them because these things were not done with AI in mind. So I think we are going to get regulated heavily. Will it keep up? It remains to be seen, I think.
And what can you see coming down the line, Richard, in terms of regulation? What can you see happening in the legal sector?
I think one of the first areas which I think we're going to see is from the insurance sector, obviously providing reports into the legal community where we carry pretty high professional indemnity cover. And I think we're going to begin to see them asking questions about what's the efficacy of the data that you're providing, and has it been, used Gen AI, for example, to help create it. So I think they're going to start asking more questions about that. And really the extent to which we're deploying that alongside human expertise that they already can see from our track record can be relied upon. I think more generally, I think we're all seeing a huge assault in society just from fake AI. It's out there all the time now, and that's not going to be lost on politicians and regulators. They're going to want to make sure that doesn't gather too fast and cause the society problems. So I think we're going to see all sorts of regulations to build on what Scott's saying coming in.
Okay, and Scott, just to build on that, the kind of the fake AI, we've talked before this about bad actors in the world of AI. What are your concerns about bad actors and how dangerous they can potentially be?
I think it just makes the general practice that bit harder. I think we're all kind of tuned into, well, this looks like a dodgy email. My phone now tells me suspected spam, don't pick up, and then I can just block it. But if the AI is built using sophisticated, algorithms to think, well, I'm going to make this as convincing as possible, can you always spot these? Will you always spot these? And I think the larger firms and organizations like us as part of the Landmark Information Group, we're fortunate that we're kind of protected by our IT team, but smaller organizations, it is an awful lot harder. And there's always been that challenge, but I think it gets a bit more challenging yet still. And as Richard says, fake AI, what's real? Are the advisors that say they can do this going to give me the advice I want? Can they do what they say they can do?
I mean, are some AI advisors, and obviously don't mean all of them, is it the modern equivalent of the snake oil salesman? Is there still those people out there who are seeing a market opportunity and just taking it without any of the necessary qualifications?
I think there's always the potential. I think the examples I could see is that if somebody goes in and says, well, let me build you something and we'll use your data, and as Richard's saying, we're thinking internally governance of saying, well, should I share this? Can I share this? But if somebody comes and says, well, I'll build you this for something, and then just disappears, well, what have they left with? Have they left with a trained engine based on your data that you're then exposing? And I think that's always the point, is like, make sure that the data is not leaving your environment, because where does it end up?
Yeah. And are we also seeing, Scott, people kind of surrounding themselves with AI assistants, that someone's running a business and you say to them, have you got, how many colleagues have you got? And actually the colleagues are AI in different aspects of the business. Are we starting to see that?
I think there's certainly the potential. Yeah. I mean, I've seen that trend and sort of post on LinkedIn and in the news. And I think that's the assumption, saying, well, okay, I don't need this part of my team. I need this. I don't need somebody to create images. I don't need somebody to create text, because it'll be this person, that person, that person. But if your organization, if your company and your startup is based on code, that's your proprietary tech, that's your IP, and then something's a little bit broken and you bung it in saying, AI, please fix my code, it's out there.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah. And you think there's a lack of understanding about people being prepared to put that data out there, and then it's kind of sucked in, and then that becomes part of the training of the future, the next iteration?
I think it could be, yeah. I think Richard, Gary and I have joked about that before, that you're putting information into these engines, the chatbots, and you're saying please, or you're saying can you?
Yeah.
You forget what you're interacting with, and I think that's the way that it's designed, that lowers the barriers, because that increases the throughput of data that is then feeding them.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, obviously there's been some publicity this week about Claude and the kind of plugins that are offered through Claude, which is that Anthropic Claude? I think it is.
Okay.
And but Claude, just sounds like a nice guy,
Yep.
Just sounds like I can have a chat with Claude. He's all right,
Yeah, trusted old gent.
Yeah, he's a trusted old fella. Now let's come a bit more on to just moving on from that, Richard, about some of the dangers. The job fear from AI is always something that comes back time and time again, about specific roles and people ultimately being replaced by AI. How are you responding to that in your own business, and how do you see professionals responding more broadly to that job threat?
Yeah, well, I think we've already got a lot of routine, repetitive, data-intensive tasks that are increasingly automated, but that's using more programmed robotics rather than AI, really. But of course, some of those things could potentially be done with AI in the future. But would I trust those technologies yet to bring, as Scott mentioned earlier, things like creativity or empathy or judgment, collaboration, all these things that you need to do to build relationships, which are important in a business context? And I don't think they're these human traits. They're essential in what we do. So I think in the business, we're absolutely in the space of seeing how best we can combine human and machine intelligence, and we will deploy AI in a sort of assured and secure way. But it'll only be with leadership, I think, to build the vision and trust around it. So I think that what that's going to mean is really realignment, not replacement of jobs. There'll be different skills required to work with AI. And I think our teams are really well equipped for that. We've already got years of experience in critically reviewing data, documents. I mean, we find every month about 80 errors in title sheets and things that come from Registers of Scotland, which we notify to them. Is the AI really going to spot that? I'm not sure it is. So I think those kind of skills are going to really remain core for us as we start to embed AI.
Okay, thanks very much, Richard. Well, what about you, Scott, on that particular issue of the job threat and the repetitive tasks within the property conveyancing sector, and maybe legal more generally? Where do you see the threats coming?
I think the resi industry is in an interesting sort of spot at the moment. I think it's somewhere that's seen an awful lot of scope creep. It's something that requires an awful lot of manual effort from the professionals, an awful lot of work, often can be quite risky, and fewer people are arguably wanting to sort of move themselves into that space. So I think if there's something that can unburden some of those manual repetitive tasks, especially with, at the end of the day, in a house moving process, people want to move in. So people are going to be on the end of a phone, either to the estate agent or to the solicitor. What's going on? Improving that could help. Maybe removing the burden on LBTT, pushing that back onto the clients with the assistance of AI, maybe that would help. And then in the commercial sector, it's kind of a different need. I think there's maybe an expectation from some clients that you would improve some processes, but equally, there's probably other clients that would then change the terms and conditions of working with you and say, under absolute no circumstance does any data go through generative AI, which presents its own challenges.
Are you finding that kickback from clients? Do you think we'll see more kickback from clients who are maybe, some of them are saying, I don't want you doing any of this, and others are doing the exact opposite and using AI themselves and challenging what the professionals are doing? Do you think we'll see more of that?
I think one of the first things that always changes is terms and conditions. And we're all guilty of not reading it on your iPhone or iTunes or whatever. But I think we'll see a bit more of that. And in particular, where you're providing advice or you're providing opinion, I think the request is going to be basically sign a disclaimer saying, this is you, it is not somebody else, and it is not born out of Gen AI.
And Richard, do you think there's an element that trust's at the heart of this? Do you agree that there's, it's so important that in the sector that you work, the relationship of trust between yourselves and the client is crucial? Do you think people will come to trust AI, or do you think for the foreseeable future, it's still that human connection ultimately that they're going to want?
Yeah, I think they will. I think they will want trusted partners to work with us. And again, I think you go back to these other technologies I spoke about earlier, and there's, as with any new technology, I think it's about being close enough not to be left behind, but perhaps letting other people do the pathfinding and find the pitfalls in it. Because I think this is definitely a case with this, is to you certainly don't want to be left behind and not using AI at all. But I think it's about being close enough to start to use it. And that's why I think I'd encourage people to, make sure that you've got a good closed loop AI system. You're not, pay for an AI product, don't just buy a free one, because then you can control what data you're putting in, where your data's going. But then just use it to try it out, because it's such a potentially transformational technology. But I think unless you understand what that potential is, you're not going to be able to deploy it properly, like any technology. I mean, I think there's a lot of people around saying this shouldn't be an IT project. It's got to be a business-led project. IT happens to create the framework to make it secure for you, but it's about you finding useful ways to do it and spotting the potential of it. And that's where real business experience comes in. It's not snake oil.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, Scott. The real business experience, as Richard says. So what's your experience of people you're dealing with in your day job and over the last couple of years in other roles, between those deniers of AI, between those who are determined to press ahead and maybe are not thinking so much about the data implications? Where's your average business person in there? And are most people somewhere in the middle, as Richard says?
I think so. I mean, I'm moving mostly around the sort of commercial sector, but I do have friends working within the resi space, and those that are within that space in sort of smaller firms, they've managed to work a way to say, well, actually, maybe some of the staff struggle with maybe tone of voice and emails and how we communicate and what we do, and to kind of complement the training they already give them, say, well, we can work out a script as to how you would respond to that type of email, and AI can assist. With the commercial firms, they've grown to such a level that many of them have directors of innovation or technology directors, and led by sort of PSLs as well, informing the information that they consume and the styles that will work in. And I think they're all building up their own processes that can really support it. I do think there's still a healthy dose of skepticism going about the marketplace, but with an acceptance that they have to do something.
Mm-hmm. And are you, broadly speaking, Scott, an optimist or a pessimist about what AI can do for you and your business?
I would say an optimist. I suppose it depends on who you would speak to, whether or not. But no, I do believe I'm an optimist. And I think I would probably say I'm sort of technology first in my my own views of it. I think I've seen kind of business transformation and industry transformation in my career, what that can mean to solicitors, how it can change processes from what seems like a very instituted, formulaic process that's never going to change. And then as soon as you're over that curve, I don't ever go back to that, is the immediate assumption. We might just take a while to reach that tipping point.
Okay, and same question to you, Richard, and another one besides optimist or pessimist about AI, but also some final thoughts on finding that real sweet spot where AI is working well for you, but human judgment is still playing its part.
Well, firstly, I'd like to say I may have come across in this as a bit of an old Luddite at some points, and I really don't, in the sense of AI, I really don't feel like that. I think it is such a powerful technology, but I think going back to the point I made earlier, that the more powerful the technology, I think the more careful we've got to be about how we roll it out and we implement it. So I think that in terms of trying to take it forward, it's about trying to see where you can safely and securely shift some of your repetitive tasks into the AI world. But doing that with supervision, with oversight, with critical thinking into your teams that provide the check and balance, I think that's absolutely essential. Transparency is also really key. It's about making sure that those teams feel, I suppose you'd have to say, comfortable in reporting back errors. I think what you'd also call hallucinations, because AI, for anyone who's already used it, it does hallucinate, and it hallucinates a lot. It'll give you some things that just really aren't right. And I think you've got to have that questioning mindset to say these things aren't right. So I think that governance is really key. I think the idea about using robust, licensed, enterprise-grade systems, really understand where your data resides. And I think also recognising, there was a recent study that suggested over half of workers and businesses are probably already using AI in your business to perform a business task, even if you don't know about it. And that clearly opens up risks around data privacy, compliance. So it's about trying to have a strategy to make AI part of your planned, shared infrastructure. And as I said before, don't just leave it to the IT team. I think they've got to help you create that secure platform, but it's really about how you adapt as a leader to embracing the culture around AI and alongside those human skills.
Okay, well, we'll definitely put you down as an optimist, particularly when you're up a ladder in the middle of the night,
with my
fixing a smoke alarm and then able to go back to sleep afterwards. That's a great example of the human and AI in a perfect loop to allow you to get back to sleep. Thanks very much to Richard Hepburn and to Scott Brymer for some brilliant insights today. This podcast was presented by me, David Lee, and produced by the Podcast Studio Glasgow. And please listen out for more podcasts from Miller & Bryce, including the excellent Handbook series.
Thank you for listening to Landmark Talks Property. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please hit subscribe. This podcast is for general purposes only. The views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not constitute professional advice.